Hi, I'm Jay Jacobs, and welcome to another episode of Going Beyond the Scale. Today, I'm very excited because I have a good friend, a fellow adventurer. I'm not as much of an adventurer as she is, but Kara Richardson Whitely, who you may have heard my podcast with her almost a year ago. It was great because Kara and I had met 10 plus years ago. Biggest Loser event. I got a chance to see and hear her story, which was an amazing story. And at that time, which is interesting, her story was really a PowerPoint. It wasn't a book. It wasn't something else which you're going to hear again today of what's happening with her in her book. But her journey, her story, the way that she writes, the way that she shares, the things that she contributes to people, to me, every time I go back and I dip into her world, everything she says so speaks to me and to the people that I have the opportunity to speak to as well. So it was a little over a year ago. If you know Kara, she's always on the move. So today I want to be able to dip back into what in the world's been going on with you, Kara. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, what a pleasure. It's nice to see you again, Jay.
Yeah.
I miss seeing you around Summit, so this is the best we have to do during these COVID times.
Definitely. Yeah, that's what's so funny was that when you and I met 10 years ago, I didn't know you, didn't know your story. There was, somebody in the audience just like, oh my God, this woman's amazing. She's done this climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and it was a fascinating story. And then fast forward like 10 years later, I'm working as a wellness navigator at the Summit Y, and you lived in Summit, and then I was living in Summit, but you went to the Y, and then Terry said, you guys need to get together. It's like, I know her. And so it's so cool. I mean,
you're like, I think I know her. And I'm like, I don't know him.
Yeah, definitely.
That was so cool. Yeah. And it's been a great friendship since, because I feel like what I love about talking with you, Jay, is that even though you and I have been completely different paths, we understand each other, and in a way that I think few people do.
Yeah.
This complicated journey with body and food and getting back up again and going through COVID times and all these other things. Like, I don't have to do the backstory with you, because even though your backstory is completely different, the treacherous areas are the same for us. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing, first of all, and I mentioned to you this before, I appreciate your generosity in allowing me to be continuing to be a student of interviewing people. I find that I really like it. I'm a writer, but not a writer like you are. Like, you are a trained journalist. You're a great writer. I am horrible at grammar. I got E's and F's in school about so I just write in the way that I talk. But what I love about spending the time with you is I get a chance to really learn from you in your writing and also in your speaking. It really helps me. And one of the things that I've learned as I've been doing these podcasts and these interviews with people, and my sister, Kelly, really has helped me think about this. She says, try to get to the point of something, because I'm very verbose and I go in a whole bunch of directions. So there are many, and you and I talked about this a little bit, there are many conversations I want to have with you about a lot of things, because you have a whole world of things that I think are solutions for people. Today, one of the things I want to make sure that is a thread in the idea of starting to test out this idea of what's the point, is your power of storytelling. One has inspired you. It's inspired family, friends, people that know you. It's inspired people in Hollywood. It's going to inspire the world as more people know your story. And the reason why that's important to me to share with people is I think that today, no matter what we're talking about, I want to make sure I keep coming back to the part, like, as you've learned and shared your story, how is it that you get other people to start to kind of come out of their shell, no matter whether they're like me, they're not a quote unquote writer or whatever, but they start to understand, which I believe, and I know you have shared this, the power of telling your story, telling your truth, outing those things, being brave like you are in sections in your book that you shared things. I think that is transformative for many people, and they may not realize it. So as we go forward in here, I just want to keep bringing you back to the storytelling part, because you're so powerful. It's incredible.
It's been really, for me, when I first started writing Gorge, it was about kind of unleashing that story of shame that lived within me, whatever you want to call it, emotional eating, compulsive overeating, binge eating disorder. So when I put those words on the page, it was kind of like releasing that shame for myself. But also, I did it without worry about what other people would think of me, knowing that 2/3 of the United States struggles with their weight somehow, some way. 2/3 of the United States is overweight or obese, right? And so it didn't matter what I put on the page, that there would be people who got it or felt heard or felt seen or felt whatever they needed to feel. What I didn't expect was that so many people would come to Gorge and see themselves in the story, whether or not they have a struggle with the scale, that it was a story about overcoming obstacles.
Yep.
And so that's been really powerful. And that's why a lot of corporations bring me in to speak, because it's really about overcoming obstacles.
Yeah.
But I think one of the greatest gifts of sharing my story is that it has allowed me to be an advocate and also share that, more than 67% of women are a size 12 or above. And, that means that I can go into a corporation. I've spoken at Pfizer, Google, Uber, Dartmouth College, Purdue, because, we want to really represent the fact that the majority of women are not the women you see in advertisements.
Yeah, definitely.
So, even me and being a larger body and being on the trail, it was a shock to a lot of people because I wasn't the typical model. And so what I've been able to do is not only doing speaking and consulting, but also influencer work. So I'm an influencer now for LL Bean, and that means that I wear their clothes, I take pictures of it. And it's not just about getting a new fleece jacket, because believe me, I've got enough fleece jackets.
Sure.
It's about showcasing a company that cares about highlighting people of all sizes, of all colors, gender identification, whatever.
Right.
In the wild and in the outdoors, and kind of really highlighting the restorative power of the outdoors. And so my aim, this year and beyond, especially as the movie then takes my story to another level, is to continue working with companies who really want to highlight that, consumer goods who want to show someone other than, a tiny little stick figure.
Sure.
As a representative for all women, because if women and people don't see themselves in those images, they don't see themselves with those products or things in that life.
Yeah, it's interesting in the many conversations I have, especially with women, and I'm sure you experience this a lot because you are at a lot of women's conferences. I'm amazed at how hard it is for women to own their success, to own their beliefs a lot of times. And I would be working with them and they have made a major accomplishment. And it's sort of like I have to actually get them to own that, like not just in the one conversation, but ongoingly. And I think what you're doing by you actually not just talking about, but how you show it and inspire people, I think that's where it makes a big difference. I think it's transformative. I mean, that's what I love about it. There are no excuses to what you're doing. And there are times that you still, like you've shared with me, there are physical challenges that happen as we age or whatever, like when you were on the long trail, that was not, I said to you, I was like shocked you were talking about how hard it was. Like, come on. I'm thinking in my mind, like, how can that be hard compared to Mount Kilimanjaro? And then you explain, it's like, whoa, I had no idea,
Yeah, I mean, this summer, my friend Allie and I did 100 miles of the Long Trail, which is the Long Trail. If you don't know, it's in Vermont. It's from depending if you go north or south, but it basically goes from one end of the state to the other. And so we started at the Massachusetts border and did 100 miles north of the 273-mile trail. Mm. And what's so tough about this trail and doing 100 miles of it, first of all, 100 miles is more than double the amount of miles that I hiked on Kilimanjaro. And I did it over a month's period of time. But the more challenging thing for me physically was that, this trail was far more rugged and far more challenging because it's up and down and up and down. I mean, sometimes if you did like a 14-mile hike, you could go up and down 3 mountain peaks.
Okay. Yeah.
And then there were, these really steep declines and stuff. So, yeah, it was hard. It was really hard. And whether, I can, there's all sorts of reasons why it was hard. The train was harder, I thought. I thought also even though I wasn't hiking in high altitude, I tend to do really well in high altitude for whatever reason. It's an easier time than others. But the terrain was really challenging. My knees were cranky. We were in coronavirus lockdown. And so I didn't have, the Y where you and I met.
Yeah.
Before I did Havasu Falls, you and I talked about, okay, what do I need to train? And you kind of really helped me streamline what's my plan here.
Right.
And I didn't have any of that support before I did the long trail. I was just like, I just got to get out of my house and I got to hike, and I just did it. And so there wasn't a lot of that preparation. At the time I didn't have a Peloton, because I used to do spinning classes all the time, and you couldn't get your hands on an exercise bike.
Yeah.
Back then in the beginning of the quarantine. So it really, for a lot of reasons, it was much more physically challenging as a journey. So I don't know if I'm going to finish that trail or not. I think, as I write my book about the long trail, that's something that I'm exploring. I think that the main point of this book is going to be about just doing what you want to do and not being, I don't have to prove myself anymore as an adventurer, and that's okay. And I just finished an excerpt of it for Backpacker magazine. They're going to be putting it in the May-June edition. But one of the most fascinating lines, the only sneak peek I'll give you, is this one line that came, because it's about fat shaming on the trail, and it's about saying some crappy stuff to me. Or, it was one of those comments that he thought was funny, but it was really a dig. So in this piece I wrote, for me, the biggest challenge hasn't necessarily been weight. It's about self-worth. And so the more I hike and the more I share my story, I realize that, my body may always be plus size. I mean, that is the truth. That is okay. But what I can change and what I have the power in this very moment right now is to focus on my self-worth and the recognition that I deserve to be in these places of beauty that bring me challenge and adventure and thrill and fear and all the things that I kind of pushed away in a life of binging.
I love that. And, you gave me something that I really want to highlight here. People that see you, because human beings are visual. People that see you or see me would say we're plus size in terms of whatever that mindset is, depending on whatever size somebody is. What I want to offer to you as something, and maybe it's something you've experienced before, I deal with, and you do too, but I'm thinking about from a male perspective, I deal with a lot of women all the time that in my mind, not my mind, their mind, they are plus size. Forget their size, because it's interesting. You talked about this before. I know I was a secret eater. I was a binge eater, all of that. So I understand what that world is. And once you are, you always are. It doesn't go away because it's right there at an instant. But what I found was a lot of people, especially women, don't have a real sense of like where are they trying to go with this. They're going through this whole mythical idea of where they're going to try to get to, and they're really still, whatever their plus size is for them, they live in that place. So I love where you're going with this, because the shaming is, yes, it's the outside world. We get that. The real freedom is the shaming we just in an instant just keep bringing. It doesn't take a hell of a lot for one word, one thought, one TV commercial, and you're right back there. It hurts people, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the most important things I've learned, especially I'm researching a book about the science of binge eating right now. And what's fascinating to me is that, for those of us who, binging is our thing, there's a lot of science, and, this is in our DNA really. But that doesn't mean when I do that doesn't mean this is your destiny, right?
Cool.
You always be a secret eater and you shall hide in the, and that you will always be the fattest, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
What it means is that you have a set of circumstances, yes, but you also can learn the tools to manage those things. Yeah. And it also means that it might come back. And if it does, what do you do when that happens? So, for example, coronavirus, I'm sure for you too, Jay, and anyone else who's listening today, has been tough. I mean, it's been tough. And so in the beginning, I was really good about, okay, this is gonna, it's just gonna be a month.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm gonna eat by the clock. And for me, grazing was my MO. Like that meant that I just kind of ate all day long when I was in the depths of binge eating disorder. So I knew that I needed to eat by the clock. And I was actually pretty good about finding that balance and just kind of saying, okay, you're going to eat lunch, you're going to eat snack, you're going to eat dinner. And like kind of, but when all the political stuff was happening, it just was like, I felt so out of control.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself kind of just, here and there and just like the dabble and oh, I'll just taste this. And so all those bite licks and tastes and all the different things that started coming back. And there was just this nebulous idea of when I was eating or when a meal started and when it ended. And so it made me realize like, okay, I need to talk to someone. And that doesn't mean that that's a failure. It doesn't mean I don't get to be an advocate anymore. What it means is that I am listening to myself, seeing the truth, and I get to go from there. So that means for me personally, that means that I need to find a dietitian. What I kind of came down to was like, okay, the emotions are okay, but food is off track. So I need to find a dietitian who is wise in the ways of binge eating disorder or eating disorders.
Yeah.
And that's me. That's what I need. And I know for you, you go in a different direction. What works for you is different than what works for me, even though the urges and things are very similar.
What's definitely similar with you and I think anybody that we have had conversations with or people that we're inspired by or people that we listen to, the one thread that goes through everything is accountability, vulnerability, and transparency. Not perfection, not friggin' perfection. That is a kiss of death. It doesn't work. Every time any of us, and it's funny because I went back, I think it was in The Weight of Being, and you were talking about you were all or nothing. Like you were whatever you do is all or nothing. And that's a great way to be, but it's not how life works. Right. And I think that's one of the things that I know it's helpful for people to understand. That one of the things I want to make sure that we get to is let's go fast forward for a second, because a year ago, you could tease it, you couldn't talk about. I'm going to come back in a second, but let's go fast forward. There's a reason why I want you to go fast forward. An amazing accomplishment that you're somebody that did what you did, created the journey that you did, made a well-being transformation, wrote an amazing kick-ass book that like everyone should read because they will see themselves in it. Like you said, besides weight, they'll see themselves, what are the as you call moving mountains, what are the mountains that they can move in their life that whatever that thing is that they want to do. But because of everything you've done, you created an opportunity for someone and someplace to actually do something that's going to be happening. And I know it's kind of delayed because of COVID, but tell people about where you're going, what's going to happen. Gorge is moving from where it is now to what?
Oh, yeah. So Gorge is being made into a movie by Amazon Studios. And Chrissy Metz, who plays Kate in This Is Us, she is producing and starring as me. Of course, there's other members of there's another production team, Patma, who is, and I have an all-female team on this.
Great.
It's really awesome. And so actually right now, things are relatively on track. Right now we're in the screenplay process, and what I love about the team that I'm working with is that any of the notes, a screenplay is always different than the book. So anybody who's mega fan of Gorge, no, it's going to be changed. I mean, like every book that's turned into a movie is always different, but a little bit different. And what I love about the team that I'm working with is they have such respect and honor my story in a way. And I had some notes about the screenplay, but then Amazon had some notes about the screenplay that were just so deep and meaningful and beautiful. And I was like, wow, you really get me. So, and I think that there's, the easy formula for a story like mine is the before and after picture. And I think that's in diet culture where so many of us get going through a loop, that this has to be a story that ends with me losing weight and being on top of the mountain, and that's it. But that's not the truth.
Right.
And where I think that Amazon and a lot of these other places are really making headway when talking about mental health issues or physical health issues, is acknowledging the complication that it is. And what this is a story about is living in the now and living in this moment versus waiting for the perfect time to do what you want to do. I mean, because I used to always say I'll climb mountains when I lose weight, or I'll buy myself a new outfit when I lose weight. And so this is a story about just going and training and being in the places that you admire, no matter your size, no matter your shape. I mean, obviously you need to train and you need to work towards these major goals. If you've never hiked in your life, do not take on Kilimanjaro. But
Right.
that doesn't mean that you can't hike. That doesn't mean that you can't go to the beach and put on a bathing suit. I mean, you deserve to be in the places that you love being, and finding ways of seeking joy.
Yeah. The thing I'd like you, so the movie it'll be produced, it'll be out there. Okay. So people that know you already, they have a view of you as being, which you are, successful, married, mom, adventurer, author, all these things that you've done and are continuing to do. What I really love, besides you sharing your story, which is going to inspire people to do whatever they want to do against all odds, if they're willing to step up and take those steps to do that. But what I really would love you to be able, and we've not talked about this, your writing course, your ability to get people to be inspired to tell their story is very powerful, because that's really, to me, I believe, is one of the biggest transformations that people don't do. They worry about food, they worry about exercise, they don't worry about what's going on here, because if you don't figure that out, the food and the exercise thing, it's always going to be like we just, it's complicated. But if you don't get your story, you're not going to get much of anything. My request is, can you go back to, everybody knows what you're doing now, and there will be a red carpet moment, and you'll have all that. You and Christy will be like, it's going to be the coolest thing ever. Mm-hmm. And they're going to look at you in a whole different way. Like, oh, you're successful. Oh, I'm not, that's not me. Go back before. You were a journalist, you were a writer, but what gave you the idea that you were even, quote unquote, because a lot of people don't think they're worthy or willing, before all this success had happened, and you would have what most people would have is doubt. What was that? What was a inciting moment or catalyst, or what gave you the thought that, who cares? Why would I do this? Does this matter? And did you really care if it mattered?
Right. That's a great question, because I do these one-on-one writing sessions, and not writing sessions, but how to make your book into a reality with people. And one of the biggest things that people come to that table with is, I want to be a writer. I'm not a writer, but as it turns out, they actually have written, and they actually have a project in the works, or a draft, or work in progress, whatever. And so much of it is just telling yourself that you are a writer, and from that moment owning that.
Right.
I mean, that was one of the greatest lessons that I got from my teacher, Cheryl Strayed. She wrote Wild. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the first things she said to us is, I worked with her for 3 weeks at the base of the French Alps, is like, from this moment, nobody gets to question whether or not they're a writer. You've all put words on a page, you are a writer. And so I try to carry some of that spirit in my one-on-one sessions with people, helping them try to take an idea, from an idea to an actual book, and kind of coming up with a plan as how are you going to make this work, and how are you going to put this into action. Because I think what the challenge or the holdup for me personally was, how do I go about doing this? And so for so many years, I walked the walk of just, okay, let's figure this out. And so I was a journalist for a decade, so I had some writing experience. And then I started writing courses in New York City, and networking, and finding ways to find an agent, and then, working with the agent to find a publisher, so that, I've already walked that journey, so I can really help people find it along the way. But I think what it takes, even if you're not at that point where you've written a few words, it takes the belief that your story needs to be heard, and can be shared. And ultimately, whenever I write, and Jay, you and I were talking before about how I write about weight, and sometimes it feels like, oh God, here I go again. I'm writing about how fat I am. Yeah. Right? But every story has a different angle. This piece for Backpacker is different than the one I did for Self Magazine. And so you learn as you put your words on the page of how it fits that moment, how you can share something in a different way. Because our stories, our human experiences of the world all have value. Sometimes you just need a little help kind of figuring out what the main thrust of it is. And also, it's also important to know that, like, yes, I'm in my office right now by myself. And when I go to do some writing later today, I will be by myself.
Mhm.
But when you're a writer, you don't just work by yourself. I mean, I've worked with writing coaches, I've worked with editors, I've done workshops. And so it's actually really helpful to have a team of people behind you. I have an agent, we work with a publisher, and so, like, hire an editor if you need an editor. These people will help bring your work from just kind of sitting on your computer to out in the world in whatever form that might be.
Yeah. One of the things that it's not a new idea, and people have, do this, don't do this, a lot of ways you can do it. Have you, if with your writing, and even before that, being a quote unquote writer, when you're talking on your class courses, do you ever have do people journal? Do you suggest, does that have anything to play in the world from your perspective? And the reason why I bring that up is on the Today Show this morning, it was interesting. Paul McCartney is going to do his memoir finally after all these years. And I guess apparently he said, I have no notebooks. I have nothing. I don't have anything at all. And he's going to write it by his music, because through his music are all the notes, quite frankly, of his life that he sees, which I thought, it gives me goosebumps even to say that. It was like, wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. And I think that's when people think about writing, like I told you already, I got E's and F's in school. I'm horrible at grammar, all that stuff. But I've learned that I can speak what I want to say, and I can get an editor or somebody that really, like my wife Kim is an incredible writer, and if I really want something to be what I would call well written, I'll write it, and she knows me, she knows my voice, and there'll be things I did, and she said, "You're not really explaining that." From your perspective, what's journaling like? Is that part of it, or are there some things that you think make sense in the world of starting to craft your story, person's story?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in my office now, and the one thing that I held on to over, many years of Marie Kondoing my stuff are old calendars and journals. I mean, those are important. I don't journal as much anymore because now when something comes to mind for me to write, I just write it.
Okay.
So I guess my journal is my computer now.
Mhm.
But yeah, and these days I'm doing more one-on-one sessions versus classes, because I feel like some people have a question that they specifically want to work on, and a class might be too general for them. And so for example, I just worked with a woman who had made some headway on a novel, but suddenly felt stopped. And so we kind of talked about, well, what was the time that worked for you to write? And she said, oh, it's after I would commute back and forth to this job, and now I'm not commuting because COVID. And I said, well, what if you took a long drive this weekend, got in your car and allowed yourself to daydream and, like, head somewhere that kind of reminds you something about your project. I'm not going to give away any of your details, but, like, find something that reminds you of a character, of a place, of an activity that is something, and go there. Just spend a little while there, do a little field trip, a little research, and then come back and take notes on your phone as you're driving, because you should not,
Yeah.
just
Sure.
you gotta do it that way. That's safe. And then come back and write. So give yourself, half a day on the weekend to just start that project. And so much of it is just is finding ways, and I'm really good at kind of helping other people find ways to make a project happen, and not just writing projects, but also with organizations about, hey, we're not really connecting with this plus size market, which is the majority of your possible customers. So that I do sessions with them on that. And I also do sessions with people on, how to take a big leap, and maybe there's an adventure that they want to take, or something that they want to do in their lives. And so I do a one-off session about that too.
The thing I love about your work is that you and I both know, having been people that have been challenged with our weight and every thought known to man that would, you're younger than I am. I've been around a little bit longer than you. I've done, like you probably have done, every diet, everything. Every single one of them does work until we decide it doesn't work for us for whatever particular reason. Mm-hmm. But what I'm committed to, and I know you're committed to because of the work you've been doing, is we both traffic in our own way in the world of thinking and thought and, sharing and accountability, because you and I could talk about all different kinds of things with kinds of foods that could eat or exercise or whatever. And we will always have a point of view about that. But one of the reasons why I love this opportunity to speak to you is because we keep coming back to, I think, something that's not done enough is the thinking process, the openness, the sharing, the, breaking away from, whatever people think they can or can't do. The overcoming obstacles, to me, is the coolest thing, because so many people get trapped into this mind, body, weight thing, and the waiting for something else. And I think that's why, one of the books I'm working on right now is called Weight Loss, WAIT, because I know in my own life there have been plenty of things I want to do, but I'm waiting for something. I think the older that you get, the less you're like, what am I waiting for? Like, this is crazy. I'm not going to be here forever. Might as well do something. But what I love from you, thank you. And I think people that really, I don't care where they are, they need to, if nothing else, if you don't get her book, and I suggest you get her book, go to your website, okay? Go there, because the whole world of who you are and what you've done and what you're doing, from your blog postings and everything you're doing, courses, classes, your writing course, people, please go there, because you're going to get a view of what's possible. And I love what you talk about, moving mountains, because that's just such a powerful metaphor that people don't really think about. So please go to your website. I would suggest you get both of her books, read them, do what I do. I highlight them, because when I highlight them and I need a quick hit, I did it before I was talking to you today. It's like, I got to go back and get a Kara hit. And I go back and like, ooh, there's so many things. So what we did talk about before, thank you for your generosity of time. I know you're busy, you're adventuring, you're all over the place, you're doing many, many things. I want to be able to have more conversations with you as you continue on this journey and share with people, because I'm committed for more people to know who you are, what you're doing, what you're up to, because it's had made a difference in the world of people's lives, and I know it will continue to. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you so much for the time. And in between those conversations, be sure to follow me on Instagram at Kara Richardson Whitely. It's up on the screen right now. And we'll see you around next time, Jay. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks a lot, Kara.